I'm pretty good at arguing with Kerpelman no matter what he says, so sometimes that's good. You gotta team up sometimes and eat cheeseburgers.
They don't know what I know. They don't know.
Rock and roll.
Welcome back to another Zengineering podcast. I'm Adam.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Ryan.
Damn. I like making the guests like join in our greeting like that because it's
I think it's great.
Right?
Gets our listeners wondering. They're like, "Oh, is someone else going to join after this intro every time?"
That's another person. Yeah, but the other side of that would be if they only hear us and then they go, "Oh."
Like, damn it, there's not another person this time.
Hopefully you enjoy it no matter what.
Well, welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
So Ryan is one of the coaches at my CrossFit gym. Basically, Ryan listened to episode 13 from last season where we talked about fitness chores and blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, I had so much stuff that made me think of. And I was like, awesome. You should be a guest. Bam.
Here I am.
But Ryan, do you want to talk a bit about your background?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Chicago, transplanted over to LA. I went to school originally for biochemistry. So that was kind of my background. And super hard finding a job in that field, especially out in Illinois. And so I ended up making my way into pretty much the fitness world. Spent some time in school again, got my certifications, been doing this for about 5.5 years. Eventually got my CrossFit certification, well, qualification more so than anything, and kind of been going on from there. So just spending my time back in school again, working my way through up to physical therapy. Eventually that'll be a fun trip.
The reason I'm stoked to get Ryan on is what's the difference of perspective that makes it fit for this sort of Zengineering space. It's like when we have conversations about fitness, it's not bogged down the way a lot are with, right, but paleo says this, and so that's how it is. Like the conversation is instead about like, well, here's paleo as an option, but then let's mash it with all these other things, or like, let's talk about the science of that and where it might not stack up. And it's like a lot of fitness conversations end up being like a fight of gurus. Like my guru says this guru says that, and it ends up being almost a religious argument. And I'm just there like, I just want to talk about like, right, but this is a fiber content of paleo versus this other option. And Ryan goes that place with me. But with like he said, with biochemistry, with nutrition, more insight than I have.
Let's do this. Let's just talk about CrossFit for like a couple minutes.
Okay.
Because you do bring up CrossFit all the time. What is CrossFit, Ryan?
If you want to go by the definition, it's constantly varied functional movements performed at a high intensity over modal domains and time, right?
Okay.
So the idea is constantly varied, that you are doing different movements in different capacities. So think of like a gymnastics movement that could be pull-ups or squats, like body weight. It could be weightlifting. It could be running, right? That could be a component to it. Functional movements are generally defined as like something that would be relatable to a day-to-day life, like a deadlift could be compared to picking something up off the floor. A squat could be going down to grab something, right? Or say like a shoulder press could be something comparable to bringing something up overhead, right? And just putting some dishes away, for example. And then the modal domains and time is pretty much just different time variables. Are you doing something for time? You have this X amount of things that you have to do, or is it you have 10 minutes to complete these movements as many times through as you can, right? So for example, like a popular workout that we do it's called Cindy, right? And it's 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats. And you do that as many times as you can in 20 minutes. It's a fun workout. But that's the general descriptor.
Right.
Yeah, I think of CrossFit as summary. My like internal impression is it's just it's a whole mix of all kinds of exercises that hit your body all over the place. And then it also seems to have sort of this layer. It has 2 other layers. It has the like group fitness layer to it, which I think is just a trend in general in fitness, that it's really functional. And then it also it has like a weightlifting component thrown in. So it just feels like a really good mix of a whole bunch of different exercises, running and lifting and jumping and burpees, like all these things.
What I would ask you, Jones, is coming from the more outside perspective and not including me, who do you see in your head when you envision the average person that does CrossFit?
The people that I see do CrossFit tend to be former athletes, which is because I think of CrossFit as a really, really challenging workout. Like I know I certainly don't want to put it in a box at the moment, but if I go through all of my friends that do all kinds of different workouts, the people that do CrossFit tend to be like college athletes, stuff like that. So not that they're the only people I know, but I think the
sort of CrossFit bro.
100%.
Well, I think there's a stigma around weightlifting in general, and anyone who tends to work out and doesn't lift weights still tends to have this like, what are you, an 80s bodybuilder in their head, which is just weird to me. I get it. It's fun. When I picture gyms, I picture like the classic like 60s, 70s Southern California dudes in leotards like lifting weights out on the sand and stuff. But
Pass me the mustache wax.
and that's even older, right? That's like 100 years ago, right? So that classic image of like strongman is centuries old, right?
Hopping on that bike with the one huge front wheel.
Yeah, totally. I think that's called a penny farthing, I want to say.
Bikes are so popular down here in San Diego. I saw a bike gang of those bikes the other day.
It's called hipsters.
Once again, pass me the mustache wax. So that gets me to another thing I had kind of on my list of like stuff to bring up. So like they have baseline workouts is what they call them. And you mentioned Cindy earlier, which is a particular workout that you're supposed to do periodically so you can measure whether or not you're improving at that particular thing.
What do you guys measure? I know like most CrossFit gyms I walk into have chalkboards everywhere, right? And people's names all over the place and numbers everywhere. What kind of stuff do you guys track?
I mean, the main idea, kind of like going back to kind of what Adam was saying with the baseline, you're tracking pretty much everything. So you're going to be looking at the weights that you lift for like squats, deadlifts, whatever that might be, your Olympic weightlifting movements, as well as your time for like any of the workouts that you do. So one of the big things is like you want to be able to repeat, right? So you can figure out, are you getting better? So really, honestly, everything is supposed to be tracked. Runs, lifts, whatever that might be, gymnastic stuff, your pull-ups.
And so then like the purpose of tracking that stuff is so you know if what you're doing is working.
What is it?
Right.
Observable, measurable, repeatable kind of thing.
Which is, yeah, exactly. Which is kind of the tenet of all fitness if it's kind of done with the purpose of getting better.
Is a tenet
right?
of
But it's
all
interesting.
science.
I think of CrossFit as unique because you're tracking, whereas a lot of fitness, you don't really track anything. Like I don't track, I've never even heard of anything that you could track in like yoga, for instance, right? It doesn't necessarily like lend itself the same way. Running does, right? Time and stuff, but that's a pretty vague thing for something you go out and spend 3 hours running. All you do is measure one thing.
But I don't know that that's true in terms of yoga, because the idea of your yoga practice, like the metric in yoga is built into the sensation of doing it. I think the baseline in yoga is the poses. And so you start out not being able to get into a particular position.
Yeah.
And then you get yourself to be able to get in that position. Then you get yourself stable in that position. Then you move to a complicated version, right? Like the progression through.
Yeah. It's a little qualitative, though. I think there's something really interesting here with how much, two pieces of CrossFit that just come to mind when I think of it again, like the tracking of all the information and the shared tracking, right? Like you can see where people are, and I know you guys celebrate when people accomplish like new best times or new best weights, and then you also sort of have like within the gym you have competitions on stuff, and I think that I'm a firm believer in everything in the world of a saying, if it's not measured, it's not met. And so like anytime you're trying to do some sort of improvement, specifically, like we're talking about here, physical improvement, if you're not measuring anything, not only are you not going to get better generally because you're not measuring it, but you're also just not going to know.
100%.
So I'm curious how this would apply to other stuff.
What I got like, oh, and had to say something about over top of you was like, I mean, to say measurability, repeatability, like all of the things that Ryan listed, like that's science. That's when you put together a study, when you put together like a scientific research analysis, whatever, like the whole idea is it needs to be repeatable. And there's a lot of studies where it comes out a certain way. No one can repeat it for 20 years. So finally we say, nope, that study was bunk. Like, right. Like, so all you're talking about when you say baselines or you say all these different things is just data. You're just trying to pick up a trail of data related to the fitness experience so you can
move forward.
Try to get better.
Yeah.
Right?
No, very true.
It's different than where we started when we first, like conversations that people have about how do I, like, what do I eat? What sort of exercises should I do? Sort of the stuff that's a little bit more abstract. And the stuff that you measure in CrossFit is actually the stuff that like represents your improvement. Like, who cares if you ate a banana or an apple today? You did 4 more pull-ups than you did last week, right? Like, it's real. It's a different application of quantifiable science, which is cool. It's looking at kind of these like representative end goals that are actually meaningful rather than getting stuck in the minutia of how did I get here?
Yeah, and I kind of think of building off what you said, like, you know, the individualized movements kind of are the foundations of like what are the goals that you're trying to achieve. When you said like I want to, I don't know, get stronger or whatever, those are the answers. Like those little pieces are what make it up.
Do you do either of you, I guess, because you guys both, Kirk, you do CrossFit how often?
3 days a week,
gym?
2 days a week.
3 days a week. What about you, Ryan?
About 6.
Okay. And do you guys mix in other forms of workouts, or do you like play other sports? Like what other?
Yeah, I mix in a lot of stuff. I mean, I train for competition more so than anything, and so that's my end goal. But I do the main things that are going to be tested in any sort of competition. But outside of it, I mean, I do Pilates, I'll do yoga, because those are different modalities that I'm not necessarily accustomed to from just doing CrossFit. And even I throw in some of those generic bro bodybuilding workouts too, because they're necessary in some capacity.
Totally.
For exactly what I'm trying to achieve. Cross training that is kind of important as well, because it's not just lifting weights, it's everything else.
Kirk, what about you? What other activities?
For me, I'm focusing on triathlon stuff. So
Yeah.
I got to do running at a certain distance because that's the distance of the race. I got to be able to bike at a certain distance. Same deal. Which necessarily, because some of those are like kind of overuse motions. I have 2 days a week. I go and I do standard bodybuilder, very specific work with weights, which is 100% so that I can do CrossFit and I can do the swimming, the biking, the running without my joints blowing out. I'm not there like, yeah, I'm gonna get my chest big. I mean,
Yeah.
your chest gets big if you strengthen that muscle, which I need to have happen, but I'm just doing it so I can pull in the pool without shoulder popping out of the socket, which, you know, is partially a product of age, but also it's just a matter of, you know, like the sport that I like doing necessarily involves volumes of swimming, biking, and running that a normal person shouldn't do.
So the place my head is going, and kind of why I ask those questions, is I'm digging. I always dig the angle of CrossFit of how much stuff is tracked, and like when I'm just at the gym lifting, you see the occasional person who has a notebook and is actually tracking everything they do. It's very infrequent. And when you go to certain types of exercises, like spin class, for instance, like there's metrics on a bike that you can see. Or if you're a marathon runner, you're tracking like your time for the race. Maybe you're also tracking your heart rate or something. And I'm curious if there's like a topic to be discussed here about like, what could there be like a whole package of information that people could start shooting for. Like, take the concept of CrossFit, where you have all these exercises, and we didn't get to this quite yet, but you said there are like some baseline combinations of exercises, push-ups and running and this and that. Is there stuff like that we could start to put together that transcends all of this other cross-training stuff, where you say like, hey, you should be able to do an hour of yoga and keep your heart rate below 110. You should be able to run a mile in 7.5 minutes and keep your heart rate below this, or like is there like a bigger package, a bigger picture that we could be looking at that could be applied more generally to people for like, hey, what are the goals? How can people mix up their fitness? How can they hitting the goals is a huge part of the success of CrossFit, I think.
It's a funny, I think, sort of secondary question that follows after tracking that's already happening, right? Like, people are wearing Fitbits.
Yeah.
People are starting to collect this data with the idea that like, it's going to motivate me to be fit. And they're starting to find that like, just having that level of activity quantified is not in itself motivational. Like, you need to have something to aim for, or you need to understand what, like you just explained a whole bunch of context for data. And right now I don't feel like that context is very well provided.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I get it from CrossFit. I get it from training for races.
Yeah, I think that kind of falls into going back to like a goal. If my phone automatically comes packaged with this like tracking app that, as it sits in my pocket, tells me how many steps I've had and that kind of stuff. And if I want, I can put more into it. Same thing with the Fitbits, where it is giving you data, but it's data for what? Like, why do you want that data? But like one big thing that we always talk about, or like I talk about with clients and that kind of thing, is your goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Because if you have like an emotional connection to something, that is usually your driving factor to getting you to do something, right? People don't want to be tired walking upstairs, so they're going to eventually figure out a way to not be tired doing that.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting place to go with this. By the time that this drops, the podcast, I mean, is released, we're probably hitting like prime statistical time for most people finally abandoning their New Year's resolutions.
If they haven't already.
Right. So in that context, it's like, so is there a better way, in your experience working with people, to approach setting a goal like a resolution so that it's attainable?
Yeah, I mean, so especially like when I worked in a traditional health club, I mean, we had a gigantic influx of people come January 1, right? And that's all these people who feel bad about themselves for X, Y, and Z from the entire year of not doing something. And for me, it really has come down to like an emotional connection, that emotional why of like, why is it that you want to do something? People come in and they're like, I want to lose 45 pounds. Well, where does that number come from? Why is that a number that you chose? Why do you want to lose weight? And kind of really digging deep into figuring out that connection to that number and to the weight, for example. It's an easy thing that always people come up with. And that's really what kind of keeps people motivated. And from like a personal training standpoint, that's something that I jot down, and I have my clients jot down, especially if they're tracking their stuff, of putting that up at the top of their book of like, this is why I'm doing this. So that way they look at it every day and they're like, oh yes, this keeps me on track. This is why I'm doing this.
I think what you're describing there, it feels like they came in with this idea of, here's this metric, like here's this number, weight, which, here it's a metric, and here's how much I want to improve that metric based on, who knows what, right? Like maybe it's what their doctor told them. More likely it's what a fitness magazine told them. And but they have this goal that you can't even say if it's realistic for them or not until you have started to work with them and you see like, yeah, maybe some people can pull off dropping that much weight as fast as they think they're going to be able to. But then there's other questions of like, is that sustainable? But by making it about, well, why do you want to lose that weight? You're decoupling, like you said, the why, that emotional component, and the metric that they have arbitrarily associated with that they think is what will get them to where they're.
Yeah, and that is probably, honestly, probably my biggest point or biggest thing that I look at for people, because that also shows a little bit of dedication too. Are they losing it for a significant other? Because that will drive them farther than anything else other than just like, I want to look better on the beach, right? There's more to it than that.
There's a yoga term, I think, for what we're talking about when you decouple this metric, what Ryan is saying as, emotional connection. I mean, it's essentially the same idea as, okay, but what's your intention being here, right? And then guiding them, because to lose 45 pounds sounds like an intention, but it's not really helpful. And where I'm going with that is the reason yoga does it is it's a mindful practice. You're not just here to do yoga. You're here to do yoga for a reason. Now, remember what that reason is, right? And if you can separate that 45 pounds from the significant other or the child or whatever the reason that you want to attain that goal is, then it's a form of mindfulness to every day see at the top of your page that you're writing your stats on the actual reason that you're there, not just the 45 pounds, and then you're looking at the scale every day going, oh, this isn't going fast enough, I hate it.
Depending on where you look, mindfulness is definitely taking a little bit more of a kind of in a forefront to some of the training principles, I think. One of the guys that I follow strongly, that's one of the things that he does with his athletes. And this is going back to CrossFit, but he's produced some of the best athletes that has touched this sport, if you will. And the very first thing that they do is he has them lay down, and like he does this breathing technique, and he sits there and breathes, and they have to think about why are they there, what are they doing, and kind of practicing mindfulness really is what it is. He brought me to a book called The Mindful Athlete. And that's kind of a big concept of it is mindfulness of training, of the why are you doing this and where are you going? Where do you want to go from here? And that's something that I do with some of my clients too, especially the ones that if they don't have a strong why, but it's there, they just haven't quite found it yet. I have them do that. First 5 minutes when they get there, usually before we even start, it's lay down, chill out. Then we have a dark room in our gym, and I'm like, sit there, breathe, and think about it, and then let's get going.
I think that's awesome.
It makes a difference, surprisingly enough. Like for the common exerciser, that doesn't come into play in any capacity because they don't really think about the mental component of exercise, fitness, and goals. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's mindfulness is kind of like it's an abstract thought pattern that you put yourself into. It's like this. I think people are recognizing the value of applying that to absolutely everything that you do, right? Like any time in your life, if you're not doing something purposefully, you're probably just zoned out and wasting your time. And whatever you're doing, you're probably not doing it very well.
Yeah, for sure.
So, to see that getting applied in so many places, especially in fitness, because I feel like for a lot of people, the exposure from that has come from something like a yogic space, and to see and feel that applied in something that seems to a lot of people to be like the opposite type of workout. Like doing an Olympic deadlift is not typically on the list of something that a typical yogi wants to do, but it's kind of the same stuff,
It's all interconnected in some capacity. Fitness isn't just squatting down and standing up. There's so much more to it, and I think the more people start to accept that there's many layers to it all, that will better your practice, if you will. Realistically, when I go in and I do my training, I'm practicing something. I'm practicing my category of fitness, if you will, and being mindful about it really puts me in the place that I need to keep going, not necessarily stop and give up, because that little devil on my shoulder talks to me often.
the devil, the poor form devil, or the eat a donut devil?
Very much so. The stop what you're doing. Donuts are way better than this devil.
Yeah.
Kerp used to eat donuts before the workout. That was his trick. Get that devil out of the way.
It's not wrong. That's also not wrong.
Donut sandwich.
So, I've had a question kind of brewing in my head as we've been chatting about this, and I think it's an interesting one that I didn't realize I've been having this conversation with people. What I'm going to say it vaguely, but then kind of qualify it a little bit. What is like fit enough? And what I mean is, I guess it seems like most, like the fundamental driving concept behind all sports and all athleticism is be the best, outperform everyone else, be the fastest, jump the highest, score the most points, have the biggest muscles, lift the biggest weights, stand on your head.
Even just outperform yourself, right? Like this idea of steady improvement. This is the thing that I sort of deal with in my fitness life, because I feel like I'm pretty fit. And so I end up coming up with things to do like races, partially to measure, but also like so I have something to do, because I guess I'm stuck on this idea of like I still need to improve, but I don't
need to be better.
Don't really need to lift much heavier than I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had this thought before, but is there a way to quantify like what we should all be shooting for? And after that, it's awesome if you want to continue and become a world-class athlete in your sport, but is there a point where like, hey, I've reached this point where I can just maintain this level of fitness and I should feel fucking awesome that I got here. And I know that my heart is healthy, and I know that I'm eating the right amount of sugars and fats and proteins, and my body's as strong as it should be for like a person who just wants to be fit and healthy and not get injured.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a definite like you should be able to do this in this amount of time per se. Like, I think the average gym goer or average CrossFit person or whatever, it's a day in life kind of concept of, can I, if you have kids, can I go and play with my kids, run around and be okay, not hurt myself? Can I play with them? Whatever. Can I go hiking on the weekends with my friends and it's not a big deal? I have, friends are in town on vacation. Can I go ride a bike with them? Like, I think that is a good quantifier of it. At least I guess in my opinion, of your level of fitness. And then if you want to delve deeper into that, if you have a sport specific, that might be where then things change and you have a little more ambition in some capacity. But I think the day in the life is the big one. And that's what I deal with a lot mostly is, I want to be able to just be a better liver of this world.
Yeah, that's a cool way that you put that, because I can picture almost someone comes in and they're like, hey, I'm not as healthy as I want to be. I want to lose some weight. And when you dig a little deeper to see what they want to do, you could almost start to list stuff like that. Be like, hey, I want to go for walks with my wife after dinner. We want to go for a 2-mile walk and I don't want to feel winded and worn out afterwards. Or, hey, I want to go for bike rides. I want to run around with my kids. I want to be able to run to the park that's 4 blocks away and feel good. Like, there's a whole host of things that you could start to list, and then people could kind of check off these like mini gains, and they're just life gains. They're just like day in the life of. I like that, the way you put that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, for example, like, yeah, I compete, but one of the things that I kind of like about where I'm at my level of fitness is it allows me to just, one of my friends just calls it play. And it's perfect. And he really comes from that idea of like, I mean, he likes to go out to like the beach and does like slacklining, or goes down to like Santa Monica and there's the rings that you can play on or something. And he can do that and he can mess around and he's not going to like hurt himself, but he can have fun doing it. And it's not going to be something where he's done playing and then he's tired and that's it for the day. He can kind of rest, recoup, recover, do it again, and just have fun.
I think a really interesting space where you see this with CrossFit is when you hear women talk about their sort of like CrossFit journey or transformation, or I feel silly saying those words because I feel like they've been co-opted by fitness magazines.
Buzzword.
Yeah, exactly. It just buzzwords out the ass. But like when you talk to, I mean, even Emily, my wife, like they frequently end up talking in terms of like, I can carry my kid for longer, and I bring up women just because I think culturally it's not as, I think there's more social and cultural pressure for us against women being strong. And so when I hear women talk about their CrossFit sort of transformations, it's them attaining things that I, because I've worked out and lifted my whole life, have never really considered as a thing that's like, oh yeah, it would suck to not be able to do that. And usually it has to do with like just picking up groceries or something, right?
Right.
Picking up a box and I didn't have to ask for help. And it's like, man, it sucks that culturally you're deprived of form of fitness, you know, that lets you feel like, oh yeah, I could pick that up. Like
a really interesting point,
right?
I have a good example I have two good examples for that. I mean, one, my girlfriend, I mean, she's 5 foot, 100 pounds. She's a tiny person. But when we moved, I mean, she was ecstatic in herself that we essentially moved by ourselves, just me and her. And she helped me carry a couch almost all the way up these like 3 flights of stairs. Eventually just got stuck and we needed other people to help. So there was no point in that. But she was like super proud of that. And
it's awesome.
You know, coming from the same thing like Adam said, like just being in fitness my entire life, like that has never been a thing that I've ever had to conquer. As well as there's a older lady at the gym that I work with, and her amazement came from when she went to go pick something up and she kind of stumbled and was able to move her foot quick enough to stop herself from falling over. And I had to almost like take a step back and like rationalize that idea in my mind of like, that's a real struggle that some people have to go through.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it's, you know, because of her newfound fitness journey.
Yeah. And that second one actually is a struggle that we all have to go through at some point.
Oh,
and
sure.
so it's something that would never cross your mind as like a 30-something guy who's been fit his whole life. But when you get to 50, you're going to start stumbling sometimes, or 60 or 70 or whatever. That's an interesting one.
I feel like I derailed it from where we were going in terms of the healthy enough idea, right? Like I think what I appreciate about the original idea of CrossFit with this, you know, modalities and weights and whatever, all that stuff that you can rattle off because you had to take a test on it. That does sound like the idea of fitness, like to just be able to do stuff. Like just to go like, oh yeah, I'll swing on those rings and not have your shoulder, you know, explode. You know, to kind of like to be able to hang on things and swing on things and jump off things and roll around on things. Like
There'd be a lot fewer things to do with your body.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you phrase it as like, should I be able to run a mile in a certain amount of time at a certain heart rate? And I mean, it's like the real answer is, I can't tell you what that answer is.
Yeah.
Because
and that's just a proxy.
We need to do some tests and see how you feel. And then we can give you your version of that question, but there's no like universal answer, which is why it gets tricky when you're talking about Fitbits, because they're tracking this activity metric. And the real answer for what's right for you is going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I really like where you went with that, Ryan. As soon as I said like metrics, like time and heart rate, like who cares about time and heart rate, right? I mean, I guess there's also like the longer term health benefits. Like, am I going to have a heart attack because my heart's not healthy? But my honest feeling with that is that's almost outside of your control. Like at a certain level of fitness, like you're just going to have a heart attack because it's bad luck, or there's something fundamentally wrong with your heart at some level, unfortunately. But like at a certain level of fitness, it should just be, what do you want to do? What do you want to be able to do and feel good about? And how do you want to feel throughout the day? And I guess I asked that question about, is there fit enough? Because I talk about this a lot with my fiance. We're both really, really active, really fit. She's a yoga instructor, and we do all kinds of activities together. And we're constantly trying to like tweak diets and fitness and sleep schedules. And like, sometimes I'm just like, geez, what the hell is wrong with us? Like, we're so healthy and happy. Like, we could be putting all this energy into something else at some point. I feel like a lot of people in our circle have that problem, but at the same time, as I'm having this conversation, I'm realizing a lot of people that you probably work with, Ryan, are people who aren't fit all the time, which is probably a much larger slice of the population. It's people who want to find motivation to be active. They want to find, how can I play, and how can I turn this thing called fitness into play for them, which is probably a much more useful thing to discuss.
So going back to like healthy enough, play on that word of enough, like enough of what I think is kind of, if you got to break it down a little bit more, is it even going farther back to what we were talking about of like, is it healthy enough to go play with your kids? Is it healthy enough to go hiking? Is it healthy enough to go do yoga with your fiance? I think it depends on the specificity of what it is that you're looking for. And that will determine where your level is at. We'll say for the average, 40-year-old person that comes walking into our gym, they're not trying to compete. That's not a goal of theirs. Theirs is just to live life and be able to move through it freely without pain and without suffering through it like they're going through a workout. And, that's their motivation when they're going through those workouts, is to keep in mind, like, this is going to help me live my life better. And that's like a motivation to then keep moving.
Mm-hmm. And so I think an interesting question that used to come up for me when I was working as a trainer, I think it relates to healthy enough, but it's phrased differently out of a client who, is paying you and coming to you regularly. The question is, when can I stop doing this? It's costing me money, right? And it's a tough one because fitness is a forever thing. If you stop doing it, it just goes away. So it has to be maintained. But then there's also this idea of, well, I want to get better and I want to improve. And so you want to track the numbers like we were talking about, and you want those numbers to improve. And then so you sort of have this like sub metric of improvement, right? There's my weight and there's how much weight I lost. And that improvement metric, when you start caring about there was improvement, which you have to in order to continue to improve, then eventually you hit a point. But if you're obsessed with this improvement metric, then you're going, well, I've hit the weight that I want, but now I'm not improving. It's like, well, no, but because you hit the thing. And so I think that's on the tip of my mind because I broke my leg in August. And so I had this sort of journey of rehab that was very much about like, I just want to get to this point where I can run and it's not lopsided. And then I got there and it was cool because I was like, cool, I'm back to normal. I can just do stuff. And I didn't still have to have this thing of like, I got to keep doing the leg exercises because it's not quite right.
People's goals are, malleable and changing. An old client of mine, when we first started, he was a marathon runner. And when we first started, he was like, I want to get comfortable in a gym. I've never been in here. This thing scares the shit out of me. And so we started lifting, and it was just to get him comfortable with it. Eventually we got to a point where he wanted to lose some weight. And so, cause he was going on vacation. So that was our thing. He came back from vacation and he had this thing in his mindset where he was like, I want to lift over 1,000 pounds between a squat, a deadlift, and a bench press. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And he was like, I don't know, I just want to do it. And so we were like, all right, that's our next endeavor. And me leaving, kind of going back to Adam where he was saying, when does it end? It doesn't. And so for him, it was just continuing being comfortable in a gym and being able to just keep lifting. And it's changed again. He wants to go back to running again. So now he's back to training for marathons. Like I don't think fitness is a clear point in time, but a journey of different concepts that you want to try and like achieve or go for,
I love that. I love what you just said.
Well, and that's the problem with the idea of healthy enough, right? It's like healthy enough implies a finish line or like a finite state where it's like, bam, got it, I'm done. And the hard thing as a trainer is to make people realize like it's not, I have to, and this is part of why I got out of it, because this is the part that you guys handle admirably and I couldn't do, is like you have to not just help them lose the 45 pounds, but it has to be in a sustainable way. So it becomes, it's if you're really good at your job, it's behavioral modification. It's not just, you come to me every day, I give you tasks, you attain your goal. And this is a place where Ryan is very effective. And I think gets to why I was like, you got to be on the podcast. Having watched Ryan work with clients and having talked to Ryan a ton, like, you understand that it's this thing of like, well, if you can't one day go and have a different attitude about fitness because of your experience with me, then I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, it very much is behavioral changes. I'm probably the weirdest trainer in the sense of I tell all of my clients that I train to them not have to train with me anymore. And at the end of the day, it's them deciding if they want to keep working with me or not. Mm-hmm. Usually it is. So apparently I'm doing something right. But that is kind of like a goal of mine is I want you to not need me. So that way you know what to do and you can figure it out for yourself to some capacity, you know?
A great mindset.
It's weird because it affects my pocket if you want to think about it in that way, but usually people stay with me.
I mean, I imagine a client that works with you to the point where they have the realization that they all of a sudden can do all these tremendous things on their own. Their initial reaction probably is more like, wow, I've got to stick with this guy. I can't believe the changes he just inflicted in me, you know?
Inflicted. In the last episode, you were talking about yoga at one point, and you said this yogic mindset of mindfulness has infected everything else. Infested, that's what you said. Has infested everything else that I do. And a really great use of a very harsh word.
Yeah, I meant that in a positive way.
Right.
But that word tends to have a negative connotation to it.
But it's one of the things that I see CrossFit being very effective with, and I don't mean see like, here's where I see CrossFit going. Like I see it at the gym. I haven't, yoga and CrossFit are the single two most effective modalities for fitness that I've seen in terms of people getting to a place where it's not about the workout. It's about a lifestyle, which I think is partially the community thing that you were talking about earlier.
It's not fitness, it's life.
But it's like, it's hard because it gets to that place of like, oh, they're all just cults.
It's okay though.
But well,
I mean, it's a great point. I mean, CrossFit very clearly breeds like a very tight knit community. And I mean, you see that just being on Facebook and seeing friends that do those sorts of workouts go. Anyone who like works out in groups continuously, like it's a super challenging and super rewarding activity. And so I think you just bond with people really tightly. And you get the same thing with yoga for a lot of the same reasons. I mean, it's all the same kind of stuff. And so any fitness, like older traditional, those aren't the right words. Like the older mindset on fitness was like, go to the gym and ride a bike, or go to the gym and lift some weights by yourself. Like go do some sit-ups. Maybe you hire a personal trainer, but
here's a list of chores to do.
Yeah.
And then you are, quote, fit.
Yeah. Here are body chores, right?
Yeah.
And now there's the grander sense of community that's coming into everything, which is a weird place to go for a lot of people. And I think they respond to it, Kerp, like you said, as like cults. Because there have always been these cult workouts, but I think they're less pop culture now, and they're more like grounded in wiser fitness models.
The group mindset works. You know, it's one thing that's interesting, and I think it parallels very well with yoga, is everyone is experiencing the same thing. So I can travel to a place in the world that I've never been to with people I don't know or don't even speak the same language. And I could do a CrossFit workout, for example, or probably yoga for this matter too. And we've experienced the same things, both home and away, that kind of binds us in that capacity of that community. Like when I was in Italy, I dropped into a gym. I mean, I speak Italian, but I didn't at that spot. And pretty much nonverbal cues the entire time, but we did the same thing. We all high-fived and was like, hell yeah, we did it. Like, good job. And, you know, we've all been through that similar process, that similar pain, if you will, for the workouts, which is motivating, right? You have a bunch of people in a room that do the same thing. Like, you're going to root each other on.
Yeah.
It's probably why athletes gravitate toward it too, because that's very much the experience of being on a team. That I think a lot of people miss out on because of how we're introduced to team sports through education.
Really neat that you mentioned being able to go and participate in these activities without speaking the same language. but yet still communicate, right? I mean, you can gesture at the workouts, you know the routines that people are going to do, you high five at the right times, like even if you're not talking in your spoken language, like there, and that's the essence of a lot of sports specifically. But I think a cool thing about CrossFit is that it is a sport. Like a lot of people think of it as a gym, but it's become like an activity where people compete and they train for it. Which is kind of the same thing that goes on with yoga. You know, there are gurus that you go and meet with, and you get books and you train on these specific things.
What would be a high five at the wrong time? a slap?
Drop the bar on your face.
Boom. Just be
When
like
your foot slips off a rubber band, one of those bands, and smacks you.
Fun nickel, man.
There's some interesting philosophical pieces we're getting to here. One of them that I was thinking about while we were chatting like 5 or 10 minutes ago was the difference between fitness and health. And like, because I keep kind of mixing up my questions here as I'm throwing stuff out at you guys. There's like do you want to be fit so you can do stuff, or do you want to be fit so you like live longer? And they're very different things. Like measuring your heart rate, for instance, maybe is more of a representation of how healthy is my heart. Am I going to have a heart attack? Whereas measuring your sprint time is more representative of like an activity you want to be good at. And maybe that needs to be more clearly differentiated for people to think about those two things separately.
I think they kind of fall into the same continuum. You know, if you were to put an overlay of heart health, or that's a bad one, let's say cardiovascular, just say like that's our blanket term. Now, if you're going to go to like a health route, that would just be, you know, say LDL, you know, cholesterol levels. Would that, and then is your heart rate in a normal or at least a healthy spot? And then if you wanted to go a little bit farther down into say like a sport world or like a competitive or fitness world, that would then fall into is my heart rate at a certain rate when I do this X exercise. So I think they're one and the same that fall into each other. I think it's just the application will determine whether what you're trying to achieve, if it's just health or if it's fitness. But yet they kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
In some capacity.
It's your mindset coming in and how you look at it, I guess.
Well, to me, it seems like the differentiators maybe like health, or at least maybe the way to look at it should be at least like health is sort of the realm of doctors, right? Like what's this baseline for how the body should be able to act or optimally perform so that it can do basic biological functions, you know, without impedance or however you want to say it, right? Whereas fitness is more about happiness, right? So fitness is more the territory of like yogis and brain doctors and I don't mean like neurosurgeons. I mean, I backed away the last second from saying shrinks because I know they don't like that term. Brain doctors was not a suitable.
Them thinker workers.
Right. But you see where I'm going with that? Where it's more like, okay, to attain health is to be within a certain range that medicine has spent a lot of time figuring out is like, okay, you probably won't die early based on the science we have. You shouldn't have a certain subset of problems based on the science that we have, like all that kind of stuff, right? And that's like, if you get to a point where you're not doing anything or behaving in a certain way that is increasing the risk of a certain number of things, then you're healthy. Past that, the other thing you're chasing is if you want to also be fit, then you've got to chase the stuff that Ryan talks about working with his clients on, which is like, why do you want to be able to do this thing? Healthy includes those aspects of happiness and fitness and whatever, but I'm trying to split off that idea of fitness and happiness from this idea of health. Health includes mental health, includes all these things that are attached to these other things, which sort of decouples them from a certain subset of science that just can't go along with the conversation about, quote, health. If you're trying to tell me that there is health to be found, having 70% of your body weight at 400 pounds be made up of fatty tissue that needs to have veins running through it and is taxing your system. Like, it's great if you're really happy, but you can't decouple that from the conversation about that not being healthy. And when you use the term health for both things, now you're like, I'm chasing this. I think it's that Zengineering space, right? Like,
do you think that the real end goal, or I'm gonna make a statement and see what you guys think. The actual end goal of all fitness for everyone on earth is to feel happy, is to be happier. And so if that is the goal of fitness, then that drastically changes kind of what level of fitness you need to achieve. Because someone who doesn't ever go to the gym or ever get up off the couch could argue that they're happy, and then they've achieved their level, the appropriate level of fitness.
But so that's what I'm saying, right? So if it is just about happiness, then it's not necessarily the realm of doctors, and we need another term for what doctors are in charge of, because ostensibly that's health. Like, what are doctors in charge of if health is just about happiness?
Doctors are just in charge of chemistry. They measure chemicals, and then they give you chemicals, and it adjusts the rates of consumption, the types of chemicals you produce.
Biochemistry?
I mean, yeah, that is essentially that's essentially what's going on. I mean, there is a lot of that can go into that. I think with health, that is what doctors do. And I think with health, if you want to think about it, it is just, if you were to look at the human body as an organism and nothing else to it, just how does it function? And the doctor would be the person that would determine, kind of what Adam was talking about with these like scientific baselines, that this is where you should be, you're not, you need to get there to be healthy. And whether or not that equates to happiness is a whole different thing. I don't, I don't know necessarily that for some instances, like health and happiness necessarily have to correlate, because I know some people who are not healthy and thoroughly enjoy their lives. But maybe it would if they were a little bit better. It is subjective. You're 100% right. Happiness is a subjective term. If you were to look at, what that is to you, yeah, I can do a whole lot more physically than what they can, but does that make me happier?
What's really interesting about what you're doing, Kerp, and the desire to get to this dogmatic aspect of fitness, it's very easy to look at someone who is very overweight and doesn't work out and tell them what to do to make their lives better, to make themselves healthier, to get stronger or skinny or whatever. The place where it starts to become annoying is when the person that you're staring down at the gym looks just like you. He's also 6 feet tall. He also deadlifts 200 pounds. And he says, no, I don't eat peanuts. And you say, I only eat almonds. And you get into this like real specific argument about like the diet you're on, or the minutia of your weightlifting. And it's this like very personal attachment to it. And I think it probably comes back to what we were just talking about, where people are often doing this stuff to make themselves happy. And so if you think of yourself as fit and healthy, which I think probably all three of us do a lot of the time. I certainly have days when I feel like an idiot, but I feel healthy and fit, and I feel happy about it. And so when someone tries to correct behavior of mine, I get very defensive. It's like, whoa, I'm already happy, man. Don't tell me what to do to be happy. Like, you're going to make me unhappy.
Don't tell me what to do to be happier. Right?
Maybe that's the root of some of the deeply dogmatic arguments that come up around health and fitness.
Well, it's very personal too, right? Like it's you or me, for example. So when it comes to health, fitness, happiness, that's my own personal thing of like my own accord of my own doing. Really it is me. And then you have someone else that's come and be like, everything you're doing is wrong. Like, well, am I? Is it?
It's really hard in the face of that to do what I am constantly doing, which is just going, well, I'm good. It works for me. And I think the real Zengineering moral place to go with it is probably if it's all about happiness, like you were saying anyway, and the difficult dogmatic piece just comes from other people wanting you to be happy and thinking that they know the answer. Like, that's actually not such a bad thing. And then it even gets into this engineering thing of like, of everything being connected in this weird way that is greater than just, that we're standing in the same room or whatever, right? Like that the fact that the community aspect is so effective, unfortunately drives that dogmatic element. But also like it's just a community of happiness. And so you shouldn't hate on it, but also to the people in those communities, don't let the fact of the community alienate other people. Because remember that the whole point is just, this makes me happy and you should know about it too. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
it's about trying. I think for me, it's try different things. If going back to happiness, if yoga is the thing that makes you happy, like do it. If it's CrossFit's the thing that makes you happy, do it. If you think it's going to make you happy, give it a whirl. If you hate it, don't do it anymore. Like, don't let other people's necessary opinions on what is good and what isn't good deter you from trying the things that could potentially be what leads you down a path of, enlightenment, if you will, of whatever that might be.
There was Adam, you sent out a video, I think to both of us, that I watched right before this that didn't really say a lot, except right at the end there was a moral that I thought was good that always jives with me. The moral was just, the person was saying, hey, of all my years of being fit and active and running marathons and doing this and that, the one constant that boils down, the one truth, the one like the source of the fountain of youth is just hard work. Just find activities that you enjoy, go out and do them, and work hard, and you'll be healthy and fit and happy.
And if you're like, try things, and if you're not doing anything and you're unhappy, just try something. Like, it doesn't even have to be part of a fitness conversation. Play some video games, talk to some people, buy a dog. Like, you know what I mean?
Buy a dog. Adopt. Everyone adopt.
Adopt a dog.
But going, like, when you're talking about, doing things that are like happy, that, whatever it is that you say will bring you, if you're looking for happiness, or for the sake of this conversation, if you're looking for health or fitness, kind of going back to what I said earlier, find that emotional why. If you can find to a root cause of why you're trying to do something, that will lead you to all of the paths that you are trying to achieve. It'll give you the happiness that you want because you're achieving what is really deep down to you. Same thing with fitness and same thing with health. It'll motivate you and it'll help guide your direction to stay on course to whatever it is that you're trying to do.
So I think that's good for getting out of here. I think, if you're listening, hit us on all of our socials or email us at hello@Zengineering podcast. We want to keep bringing guys like Ryan back in again. We want to know what your questions are around this stuff. It's like I was just talking about, it's that struggle to be objective in a subjective world, right? Like I struggle to give out health advice because I want to exist one step back from the fact that all I really know is what works for me.
I love it though, man. I get so much hate on Facebook, and I'm aware of it because I'll put up these, I use the term inflammatory, but that's kind of what they are. But it strikes up a conversation in some way where people will then hopefully talk about why they think that's wrong, why they think that's right, or what has worked for them. And it leads down a different hole of understanding, hopefully. I mean, I personally don't like I don't like people just accepting answers. I want people to ask questions and dig deeper into why they're doing stuff or why they think this is right or wrong.
If your comments aren't polarizing on a topic, then they're probably not worth sharing. Because it means you're just saying something everyone's already heard.
But go to Zengineering Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and hit us with your polarizing comments about fitness so we can queue up the next round of this stuff. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out for another one. Special thanks to our backers on Patreon. Yeah.
Special thanks to you, Ryan. Thanks for coming
Ryan,
and spending the
for hanging
evening
out.
with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's a lot of fun. I love sharing some depths of knowledge that I have, whether it's right or wrong.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Really nice to meet you.
As long as we're talking. So, I'm Adam.
I'm Brian.
I'm Ryan.
And you are the listeners. Have a great, happy night.
They don't know what I know. They don't know.
Right, it's not like there's anything wrong with steroids.